What do you think of when you hear the term 9/11? Do you think of this? How do we free mankind from intolerance? Who can we take inspiration from to find the ultimate truth and save ourselves from destroying our Mother Earth? Does India have something to contribute to the crisis that is facing humanity? The great monk, Swami Vivekananda, roared the message of the fundamental spiritual unity of life on September 11th, 1893, in the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, precisely to answer these questions.
Sisters and brothers of America.
These loving words were enough to captivate everyone. Vivekananda once said,
I have a message to the West as Buddha had a message to the East. I shall not cease to work. I shall inspire men everywhere until the world shall know that it is one with God.
Who was this man? How did he reach the shores of America, Europe, and so many countries around the world? Let us embark upon this journey, a tale that begins in the outskirts of Calcutta, where the Datta family resided.
Swamiji's father was a respected lawyer named Vishwanath. He was married to Bhuvaneshwari Devi, a cheerful, devoted, and deeply religious woman. After praying fervently for a son, Narendra Datta was born on January 12, 1863 on Makar Sankranti Day. Little did they know Naren would usher in a new age of spiritual consciousness throughout the world. Naren was a sweet child, but also had incredible energy and was prone to fits of restlessness at the tender age of 3. His family had a hard time getting him to calm down, and his mother could only calm him by pouring cold water on his head and chanting the name of Shiva in his ear. He needed 2 nurses just to take care of him. Naren also had a great affection and fancy for wandering monks. He would always give anything he had to a sadhu asking for alms, and once gave away his own dhoti as he had nothing else with him. Even after being locked up in his room, he would throw things from his window to traveling sadhus as an offering to them. By age 8, he was in 2nd standard, attending the Metropolitan Institute of Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. However, studying was hardly something Naren had to spend a lot of time in, so he spent much of his time in other activities. Occasionally, he would gaze off into space, drifting seemingly into some other world, and would proclaim by reading his own palms that he was destined to become a monk. He had a spirit of adventure and fearlessness, and once spent many hours on a tree to prove that no ghost existed in it, as an old man nearby had told him. He later said,
Do not believe a thing because you have read it in a book. Do not believe a thing because another has said it is so. Find out the truth for yourself. That is realization.
Naren attended the Scottish Church College between 1881 and 1884. He grew more intellectual in nature and joined the Brahmo Samaj, a Hindu social reform organization that protested against certain orthodox practices in Hinduism. Dissatisfied with mere intellectualism, the desire to know the ultimate truth and to know God became stronger. He asked many people whether they had seen God, but no one gave a satisfactory answer to him. One of his professors mentioned that the great saint, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, was not too far away, so Naren and 2 of his friends decided to go meet him. The meeting was a strange one, with Sri Ramakrishna talking to Naren as though they had known each other for years. Naren immediately asked the question as to whether Sri Ramakrishna had seen God, and he replied,
Yes, I see him just as I see you here, only in a much more intense sense. If one weeps sincerely for him, he surely manifests himself.
Naren was totally taken by Sri Ramakrishna's direct response. He knew that there was something special to him in spite of the fact that his intellectual side had some trouble completely believing him. Yet it was not long before Naren would completely surrender himself to this wise sage.
After completing college, he was drawn back to Ramakrishna and grew tremendously under his guide. His spiritual training went on for over 4 years and included fun and frolic, as well as intense discussions and teachings of Vedanta, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. By 1885, Sri Ramakrishna was tragically diagnosed with throat cancer, and everyone knew that his end was not far away. Narain's meditation intensified at this time, and just before Sri Ramakrishna's passing, Narain had his first experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the total dissolution of oneself into the Brahman or Supreme Divinity. Just before passing away, Sri Ramakrishna passed out saffron robes for all disciples and established Narain as the next head of the Ramakrishna order. Although all the disciples were in deep mourning when Sri Ramakrishna passed away in 1886, they knew that they had been extraordinarily fortunate to have partaken in his life and teaching. By 1887, Narain and the remaining disciples established a mutt or monastery at Baranagar near Calcutta, where he gave each of them new names as monks. Amongst them was Gangadhar, who received the name Swami Akhandananda. Swami Akhandananda later became the guru of Sri Guruji Golwalkar, the second head of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Although Narain initially took the name of Swami Vividhishananda, it was rarely used, and he eventually took the name of Swami Vivekananda. In 1888, Swamiji began to travel across various parts of India. During his visit to Rajasthan, he met Mangal Singh, a local king who firmly believed that worshipping a stone or an idol was foolish. Swamiji knew that there was no way to intellectually convince him otherwise, so he asked the king's minister to take a picture of the king that was hanging on the wall and spit on it. The minister was shocked by the suggestion and immediately refused to do so. Vivekananda said to the king,
"See, Your Highness, though this is not you in one sense, in another sense it is you. One glance at it makes them see you in it. Thus it also is with the devotees who worship stone images of gods and goddesses."
This was the bold and direct way of Swamiji that brought a change in everyone he met. It was here in Rajasthan that Swamiji met the Raja of Khetri, who gave him the name Vivekananda. Afterwards, he visited Gujarat and traveled through many parts of South India as well. During his journey, he had seen in great depth the kind of poverty, hunger, and degeneration of our ancient Hindu practices all over India. He eventually reached the shores of Kanyakumari, where in frustration, he dove into the water and swam to a large rock, where he meditated for 3 days. Why had India reached this state? In his meditation, he realized,
India shall rise only through a renewal and restoration of that highest spiritual consciousness that has made her at all times the cradle of nations.
He knew that this could only be done, however, by inculcating a spirit of service and by uplifting India's downtrodden masses. But how could he take this message to everyone? In this moment of calling, he looked out to the ocean and realized he would have to go to the west to spread the message of Vedanta. On May 31st, 1893, with the help of money collected by the Raja of Khetri and other disciples, Swami Vivekananda set sail for America by ship. After passing through East Asia, the ship eventually landed at a port in Vancouver. From there, he took a train to Chicago. As the American people were unaccustomed to seeing Hindu monks in saffron clothing, he was mocked and discriminated against by the local populace on several occasions. It was then, in the middle of July 1893, that he also found out that the deadline had already passed for signing up as a delegate for the World Parliament of Religions. Swamiji on multiple occasions thought that he may simply have to return to India. But he knew that the message of Hindu Dharma and universal oneness had to come to the West. His guru Sri Ramakrishna had already given him this directive in his meditations. In an effort to save money, Swamiji moved from Chicago to Boston. There he was able to meet the famous professor J.H. Wright of Harvard University. Professor Wright was so impressed with Swamiji that he insisted that Vivekananda represent Hinduism in the Parliament of Religions. Professor Wright stated,
"To ask you, Swami, for your credentials is like asking the sun to state its right to shine."
The professor wrote to a friend who was the chairman of the committee of the parliament,
"Here is a man who is more learned than all of our professors put together."
The professor sent Swamiji to Chicago with a train ticket to stay with his friend Dr. Barrows. Unfortunately, upon reaching Chicago, Swamiji realized that he had lost the address and went asking around for Dr. Barrows. Unable to find him, Swamiji spent some nights homeless, finding only a railway freight box to sleep in. One day, while roaming the city, a lady, Mrs. George Hale, asked him where he was from. Realizing his unique background and need, she asked Swamiji to stay at their home, where she and her family helped connect him to the rest of the delegates of the World Parliament of Religions. Again, a divine power had guided Swamiji to the right place in spite of all the obstacles that he had faced. The Parliament of Religions was held in Chicago from September 11 to September 27, 1893. It included representation from various Christian denominations. Swamiji finally came forth to speak. He gazed at the audience for a moment and began,
"Sisters and brothers of America."
Just with that, the whole audience rose up, shouting their applause. After a full 2 minutes, Vivekananda continued,
As the different streams, having their sources in different places, all mingle their water in the sea, so, O Lord, the different paths which men take, through different tendencies, various though they may appear, crooked or straight, all lead to Thee.
Later on during the Parliament, he said,
The Hindu refuses to call you sinners. Ye are the children of God, the sharers of immortal bliss, holy and perfect beings. Ye divinities on earth, sinners! It is a sin to call man so.
The New York Herald wrote,
Vivekananda is undoubtedly the greatest figure in the Parliament of Religions. After hearing him, we feel how foolish it is to send missionaries to this learned nation.
Swamiji's words reflected his direct experience of the divine and thus penetrated deep into the minds of his audience.
Swami Vivekananda had captivated America. His sheer earnestness, sincere emotion, and spirit of universality took the Parliament by storm. His popularity was described aptly by the Boston Evening Transcript, a local newspaper, which stated, 4,000 people in the Hall of Columbus would sit smiling and expectant, waiting an hour or two of other men's speeches to listen to Vivekananda for 15 minutes. The chairman knew the old rule of keeping the best until last. News of Swamiji's popularity spread to India as well. Editorials by various American writers praised Swamiji's unique contribution, even thanking India for having sent him to Chicago. Swamiji's doors were now open to travel about, as he was invited to speak in a variety of public events. He was invited to the homes of many prominent and wealthy individuals, especially near Chicago and the East Coast. Mr. John D. Rockefeller, the famous industrialist, met Swami Vivekananda in Chicago. During their conversation, Vivekananda tried to inspire him into social action and told him that although he was a rich man, he was not the owner of the money he earned. Rockefeller was visibly annoyed. Swami explained to him that he was a trustee of the money and his duty was to do good to the world. Rockefeller did not seem to be impressed. A few days later, he returned with a changed mind and heart. In his hand was a document that had his plans to donate money by creating public institutions. This was Rockefeller's first large donation to public welfare. Later, as the richest man in the world, he would also become a legendary philanthropist who would go on to define the structure of modern philanthropy. Swamiji continued to tour various parts of America, including Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, and other parts of the Midwest. He sometimes would be mistaken as an African American and would be rejected stay in hotels or barbershops. Upon finding out the next day in a newspaper who Swamiji was, they would go to him and apologize. Later on, when a Western disciple asked Swamiji how come he didn't explain who he was, Swamiji replied,
What? Rise at the expense of another? I did not come to earth for that.
Swamiji even faced a situation where he was invited to a small town in the Midwest, where upon commencing his speech, some in the audience proceeded to fire bullets past him to scare him off. But Swamiji continued unperturbed, and the cowboys who shot the bullets called him a right good fellow, since he didn't show any fear throughout the ordeal. By 1895, Vivekananda had set up a private lecture class in New York, where he discussed different spiritual paths, particularly on Jnana Yoga and Raja Yoga. He then traveled to England and had a lecture tour there as well. During the winter of 1895, Swamiji met Nikola Tesla, the father of electricity and a well-known scientist. Tesla had attended some of Swamiji's talks during the Parliament of Religions and was keenly interested in the Vedantic perspective on the relationship between energy and matter. Swamiji mentioned clearly in this context that,
I have myself been told by some of the best scientific minds of the day how wonderfully rational the conclusions of Vedanta are. I know one of them personally, who scarcely has time to eat his meal or go out of his laboratory, but who yet would stand by the hour to attend my lectures on the Vedanta. For, as he expresses it, they are so scientific, they so exactly harmonize with the aspirations of the age and with the conclusions to which modern science is coming at the present time.
In England, Swamiji met Margaret Noble, who became his disciple and took the name Sister Nivedita. She was a rare example of a woman with a deep spiritual quest, as well as a profound love and compassion for the people of India. During this time, Swamiji also sent a series of letters to his disciples, as well as brother disciples in Baranagar, to develop a movement wherein spirituality would not just be about one's own salvation, but about serving mankind. In one letter to his brother disciple, he stated,
You have renounced everything. Come, now is the turn for you to banish the desire for peace too. Don't worry in the least, heaven or hell, don't care for anything, but go, my boy, and spread the name of the Lord from door to door. It is only by doing good to others that one attains to one's own good, and it is by leading others to bhakti and mukti that one attains them oneself.
These words provided the inspiration that ultimately led to the founding of the Ramakrishna Mission. By 1897, Swami Vivekananda left America and arrived in Colombo, Sri Lanka. He was given an ecstatic welcome there by thousands of people. His voyage continued through India and was filled with earnest devotees and people waiting to hear Swami Vivekananda's inspiring words. He spoke on the great spiritual heritage of India, as well as the need for the social upliftment of India's masses. He said,
Service to humanity is service to God.
The series of lectures he gave through this journey gave rise to the book From Colombo to Almora, which encompassed the patriotic fervor and spiritual intensity that he charged everyone with. In 1899, Swamiji took a second trip to America, visiting the West Coast and establishing Vedanta societies in San Francisco and New York. He also visited Europe as well as Japan, attending various conferences on religion. By 1901, he returned to India. Tragically, his health was declining severely due to asthma and diabetes, and he had told several people that he would not live to be 40. Swamiji passed away, attaining Mahasamadhi on July 4th, 1902 while he was meditating, and was cremated on the banks of the Ganga. Swami Vivekananda's life was a tribute to Hindu Dharma, a dedication to the spirit of universal peace, and an inspiration for all. He spoke both of the need to develop an indomitable will in the face of difficulty, as well as the need to imbibe deep humility and serve your fellow human being. Few have inculcated both qualities so completely and manifested it into their lives as a role model for all to come. Come, join Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh in celebrating this year the 150th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda to spread his message and imbibe his spirit of selfless service within each other.